a lot of the best strategies I've seen for getting reviews are when attorneys ask for reviews during like consultations. I've almost never seen that fail.
Sure, strategies, sweet success.
Didn't you have like a storm this weekend or something?
Oh gosh, we've been having crazy storms here in the Midwest. I live in a location that is very centrally localized. And yeah, we've been having insane amounts of tornadoes and not I mean, thank goodness it hasn't hit directly, but they've been all around us. And here recently, like within the last couple of weeks, I was on Facebook and one of my friends, their family in Iowa, complete neighborhood just absolutely demolished. But yeah, there's a lot of like storm damage and things, even big commercial projects that you're working on, you have to consider partners. Like, hey, we'll do this part of it, and then you guys will do that part. So you have to find a partner that is reliable enough that if there is going to be a storm, which right now there likely will be one later this week, it'll hold up through that storm, and then they'll be willing to insure the damage if anything happens. So there's a lot of factors that you have to think of when you get on a bigger scale like that of services and not just products, but how much you can rely on someone.
Um, have you posted in like Facebook groups or anything like that when you're looking for a landscaper? Have you used, or are you a part of a Facebook group?
So there's a lot I like to contribute. There's a couple of groups that I am a part of. Like I do like the local planters, like the gardening groups, and they'll look for big like, hey, who can deliver, a ton of soil,
Yeah.
and so there will be businesses in those groups too that will chime in. But if you're not a part of the group, then all you can do is recommend and be like, "Hi guys, I hear you're looking for soil. A good place to go is," and then tag, and they'll have to like kind of take it from there and go. Um, but as far as like making recommendations, I do enjoy like anytime a friend of mine posts something on their social media, hey, I'm looking for a good service. What can you recommend? I always feel like, hey, there's a lot of options out there. And definitely I'm not saying that I looked into all of them, but here is one that I have a good experience with. Now, me personally, I like to promote rather than uh, diminish. So if there's somebody that I didn't have a good experience with, I'm not just gonna throw them in and be like, whoever you go with, avoid these people, they suck. I just don't feel like that's really helpful unless a friend of mine is like leaning towards that specific business that maybe I had a bad experience with. I might message that person and be like, "Hey, I saw you're looking at this online. I made a post about it. I didn't want to chime in publicly, but just kind of take this for what you will. Make sure to look for this and this. Maybe avoid working with this person necessarily." I just, I believe in karma, and there's business karma and there's social media karma. And I don't want to do something to somebody else that's later gonna throw me into like an argument or something.
Yeah. What I'm kind of seeing, because I'm not native to where I live, because I live in Virginia and I'm actually from like Springfield, Missouri, the Ozarks. And so like I joined, like when I moved out here, like the Facebook group for the county I live in, and a couple other that are like locally focused. I see it all the time on there. It's like, hey, who needs a personal injury attorney? You need a landscaper, need a contractor. There are recommendations there all the time. And like it surprises me how often people are just looking for like, again, I'm in legal, so whenever I see somebody looking for a personal injury attorney there, I'm like, "Huh." Like, but there's, not a whole lot of ways you can kinda jump in there. I know that there are services, like, this is kinda crazy. Like, there are services, lead generation services for law firms that'll set up fake profiles on these, like, localized group accounts, and pretty much that's all they do is that when somebody asks for a recommendation for the service they're trying to promote, they're there with the fake account doing their best to promote their business. I mean, isn't that crazy? Um and I mean, I've never worked at the law firm that's used one of those services before, but like sometimes like it's you have to be really careful about where you get recommendations from. And then like if you're a law firm, like that's the tactic some of these businesses are using to generate leads, which is kind of crazy. Um So before we like started recording, like you and I were both talking about because like we have experience like shopping as customers and we generally know what we're looking for, but also like you work for a corporation and you had to coach people on how to ask for reviews, how to get survey responses. And I know like as a from where I sit as like a fractional CMO as a legal marketer, I know like a lot of the law firms I work with were constantly kind of refining the processes and how we ask for reviews, how to get reviews. And here in a little bit, I'll run down some of those, like kind of the more basic strategies that we've used to get reviews. But you were saying something earlier about like how you have to word the request for reviews that I thought was really great. Would you like, if you can remember, would you kind of go back into that a little bit?
Yeah. So one thing that you also mentioned it too. We're never supposed to just outright say, "Hey, take this review for me." Like it's kind of like, "Oh, whoa, what? That's desperate." So we don't want to appear desperate. So one thing that we would lead into the request, if you will, the roundabout way of asking for it, is we would be very honest and transparent by saying we're feedback oriented. We thrive on feedback. We want to know what we're doing well so we can keep doing it and we don't lose it. We also want to know what we can do better because we're always looking for a way to improve. So if you get the chance to leave some feedback, I'd love to hear it. In fact, my boss has an incentive going for whoever gets the most funny jokes back on their reviews, could potentially earn a lunch. So I'm glad that we were able to help you, and I'm thrilled that you got this issue resolved. Now you can go back and enjoy your day. And if there's one thing that you can do for me and the company is if you get the chance, give us some good feedback. We're always here to hear it. I'm also going to send you something that we call our personal guarantee, and it has our name on it. So I'm also going to send you my personal guarantee. That way you remember who I am and you can call me out when you leave us that feedback. So it's a little assumptive and it also does kind of build that personal connection. And it's not really like pandering for please leave me a review. It's more of like a fun, lighthearted kind of like, hey, I scratched your back, you scratch mine. This is all good, lighthearted. And it kind of sends them off with a positive feeling left in their head. That's the last impression and it's most likely going to be the impression that they leave on any kind of survey or review.
Yeah. And the people who leave reviews, they tend to be either the happiest people or the most unhappy people. And so, like, happy people, like, when they're happy with their service, they feel like they've made a connection and, like, somebody has actually helped them. Because I've had to, like, go through, like, customer service and, like phone customer service experiences where I'm calling because, like, something didn't go quite the way I expected, or I need a refund, or I'm upset. And, like, usually it's, like, the person who handles the call and, like, how they react that dictates, like, how I feel about the experience. Because like, in most cases, like, I get what I want. Like, I get the refund or I get, whatever I'm looking for, the affirmation or whatever, but, like, how I feel about it is, like, how the person, like, responds to me and communicates and all this. And I you just love feeling like you've made, like, a real human connection. And I mean, that's important when you're trying to get reviews because a lot of the best strategies I've seen for getting reviews are when attorneys ask for reviews during like consultations and they say like, "Hey, since I was able to help you out with this free consultation, I'd appreciate it if you'd go on to Google and review our business." And I've almost never seen that fail. Like I've never seen the actual attorney asking for reviews, not get reviews en masse. And usually like when they're not getting reviews en masse, it's like, they worded it slightly wrong, but that's so rare. Like most of the time when somebody calls and talks to an attorney and the attorney says, "Hey, if I helped you, will you leave us a review?" People respond and they do. And that's one of the top ways that a lot of law firms are getting reviews right now. And then also a lot of asking your employees to to get reviews from the clients that they're interacting with. We talked about that, and I mean, it continually impresses me, like, how you're dealing with, like, so many people, like, in the role that you're in and the job that you're in, like, you're training people on intake teams who probably don't have a lot of experience coming in, right? And you're taking them from, like, no experience to, customer service for a big company. Um, I mean, honestly, that's really impressive. Like, I mean, how do you take somebody with like very little experience and get them from like A to B? I'm curious.
That's the bread and butter of what I've been doing for the last 10 plus years is how do you kind of win somebody's will to want to learn the ins and outs of how to make somebody feel that they had a good experience. Because it's not just a 9 to 5 job where you can just like go on autopilot, punch in, punch out, do the things and be a robot for 9 hours of your day. It's nothing like that. You have to be on your game. You are talking to people, and most of the time they're upset. I'm still waiting for that phone call where somebody calls in. They're like, "Nope, no problems. Everything's great. You guys are just terrific. Thank you. I'm very pleased, happy as could be. Goodbye." I haven't had that phone call yet. I'm still waiting for it. But honestly, like people are upset and that's intimidating. So somebody who's fresh off the street like I was when I started, I was a bartender before I had come into this environment. I had no clue what I was getting myself into. And so I'm the kind of person though, I know that you will get somebody to do the work if they believe in the work that they're doing. Now that has two parts because number one, you can give somebody the operations manual and be like, here's how you do it. But then the second part is how do you make it easy? Where are the shortcuts? How do you make it seem like achievable and not just able to like do it and scrape by, but do it well? So I coach my people to get from A to B and kind of like advance their expertise, if you will. It's all a mental game, really. So I kind of tell people like, what does this customer believe in? What is driving this person? Not the physical thing that brought them here, but what are they passionate about? Why are they putting in all this work? What do they believe in? Now make that what you believe in. So there's a kind of like a call flow strategy, if you will, on how to balance effectiveness and efficiency because we gotta get through this in like 10 minutes or less. So there's little points along the way, and I'm sure future podcasts we could dive into that if we need to. But the same goes for the advancement of the person in the seat and the willingness of the customer to feel like they got a good experience out of it. Because if the employee in the seat, if they're just like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, well, let's just kind of take a shot and hopefully we'll figure it out. That person at the end is going to be like, this was a terrible experience. But if you get that person, that customer on the other line, if you get them bought into the fact that, hey, whatever the case may be, what brought you here, your reason is my top priority. Clear everything off of my plate. Your reason matters. It's important to me. I feel it. Whatever the case may be. If it's good news, which I hope it is, I'm going to be thrilled to tell you. Not because it makes my job easier, but because it's what you want to hear. Now, on the other hand, if it's news it's not so great, I have an obligation to be honest with you. Are you with me to take this journey? Let's go find out what that answer is going to be. Let's do it together. So that way, well, a lot of the times it does end up being pretty bad news. It's not personal attack. A lot of times people will be afraid to deliver bad news and they'll like hold it back and be like, I don't want to tell this person. I don't want to tell this person that. And those moments are when I'm training my people how to advance their service skills. I say, you're not here to make anybody happy. The product sells itself. You are here to tell someone an honest answer that can be backed up with policy and just be respectful, you know? So if you
And
kind of like break it down, it seems a lot more achievable.
that's great guidance for intake teams. I mean, it really is, and I mean, it's great guidance for prepping your employees to like interact with customers and establish like this real personal connection with them. Because the more like within a law firm, the more that the employee is allowed to connect with the clients, like one, less work the attorney has to do themselves, the less like emotional client management the attorney has to do themselves, which a lot of the lawyers that I work with, who are focused on like growing a business, they're not, trying to create more work for themselves. They want their employees and their teams to like have these like really good relationships with their customers. And also, by extension, like be able to do things like handle conflicts, request reviews, and to do all of that stuff with like a decent success rate. And so
And
like, go ahead.
oh, to but that decent success rate and getting reviews, like kind of how all this ties in, you're gonna have more positive reviews, even if you have to give bad news, if you delivered it in a way where the person believes that you're on their side and then you're being respectful. If you make the goal of the conversation and the interaction, I'm gonna give you the answer you want, you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you make the goal of the interaction, I'm going to give you an honest answer and I'm going to be respectful to you the entire time. And I'm going to keep your goal at the forefront of my mind. If you make that the theme, then even if you have to give a bad answer by the end of it, they're still likely to give you a positive review.
Yeah. Well, and something that I think would make so like you're talking about developing a personal relationship and that takes time. Like I know like probably within your organization you're also like focused on like okay, how can we shorten calls? And law firms they're all about that too, but I'm sure there's like a necessary amount of time that they need to spend on the phone to like make that connection. So like balancing like the time on the call with like the human part of it, the relationship building part of it. Um, and then like doing it also efficiently that the person gets off the call, leaves a good review for the law firm, and is just generally happy with their experience. I know like from personal experience and from listening to these calls, like a lot of people when they call a law firm, they're being like moved through the call really quickly, and there's not like a whole lot of that relationship building. And sometimes I think that's what people want. I think maybe kind of going a little bit off track, but like I'm constantly like wondering like, okay, do people want to be on the phone with the law firm a little bit longer to get that extra personal touch? Or do they want the call like handled quickly and as expediently as possible? I go back and forth on that constantly myself.
That's a huge point of what I do because with the volume of customers that we serve every single day, I mentioned earlier, like I've got 11 different communities in my job, and each community is serving 3 to 400 people a day. So there's a massive volume of people, and we're just one of many sites across the country. So there's a massive volume of customers that we have to serve. And we found that a good balance is about 10 minutes for us, 10 minutes. But the way that you can effectively understand, engage when a customer has had enough of that rapport building and they're ready to move on is just by asking them. One of the things I always like to do is I'll acknowledge whatever they called in about. I say, "Hey, this is valid. You have every right to feel this way. I'm feeling this way too. I'm on your side. Hey, you got the right person with me. I like to consider myself a policy detective. So then you ask them, are you with me to focus on what we can do from here? And if they say yes, great. Let's go to the next take the next step. And a lot of times they'll say yes, and then they'll continue talking about their reasons. If they continue talking about what brought them to this moment, to this phone call, it means that their emotions have not been pacified or resolved or effectively acknowledged to the point that they're looking for. So you can kind of pick up on this with active listening, right? You can say, "Hey, are you ready to move forward?" And they go, "Yes, I'm still upset about what happened earlier. Hey, you know what? Let's take a pause on that next step. What would you like to see? What would you like? I have a lot of resources. I can send feedback. Would you like for me to do that?" You kind of still have to maybe kind of pick a little bit more until you find where that sweet spot is in their heart, and they're like, "Oh, okay, they're gonna send feedback on my behalf. All right, cool. All right, that's awesome."
And then, so for law firms, like one thing that you guys can like think about what Christina's talking about and how like you can kind of translate this to like, okay, like how do I take her advice and bring it to like my law firm's phones and translate this and how do I get more reviews? Like So she's talking about rapport building. And so if you want like a review machine for your law firm, like what you need to do is focus on like how can I get reviews from everyone who leaves my law firm feeling good about their experience. Because Google, they want us to have authentic reviews, like reviews from real people and not like family, friends, employees. And people who have had like actual experiences with the business. Now that doesn't necessarily mean like they have to sign as a client. They could be somebody who calls and consults with you or somebody who, you know, ultimately that you have to reject, and a lot of times like with law firms, like the trouble comes like dealing with the people that we had to reject their case and making them feel like good about the fact that we had to reject them. Because like time and time again, like the bad reviews I see the law firms get aren't from people, at least for the law firms that I work with, the bad reviews that they get aren't from people who've had like bad experiences or are unhappy with their result. But more often it's people who've been rejected by the firm who call with a case that, the law firm couldn't help them with. They don't have grounds, they were at fault, or it's just not the right type of case for the law firm. And they have to refer it to somebody else. Like those are where like law firms get bad reviews. And that's where like people call, they don't feel like the law firm heard why they were calling. And for law firms, like a lot of us will think like, well, that's not the case that we want. We're trying to get them off the phone super quick. Um, but it's really important to like make the people who call the firm feel heard within like a reasonable time frame to establish that rapport. And maybe instead of getting a 1-star review, you get like a 5-star review. It's like I called and they weren't able to help, but they're able to point me in the right direction, or I understand a little bit more that I didn't. And I really appreciate this firm. I've seen law firms get those types of reviews, so it is possible.
You mentioned something I tell my team never to say. Whenever somebody says they couldn't help me or I couldn't help you, I tell my team, nope, we're not paying you not to do something. We're paying you to do something.
Yeah.
Even if that something is just giving them an answer, the honest answer. So a lot of times whenever we have to tell somebody news that, maybe we do have, we also have to refer people out to like an insurance company or a manufacturer or a third party or wherever the case may be. Like we do have to refer people to, hey, your resolution isn't going to be had with us. It's actually going to be had with this company over here. We stand tall on proudly on the fact that we pointed them, we got them closer where they need to be versus where they were at when they came in. So I'm like, find that silver lining and really hone in on that. Because if anybody leaves a call feeling they couldn't help me, that right there is a bad review. Even if they don't leave a review word of mouth, if anyone goes around saying that company did not help me, that is a bad review. But if somebody walks around and said, "Hey, that company wasn't able to take my case, but they did point me in a direction where I could go and where I would have the representation that I need and deserve for the type of case that I have," I can be very grateful for something like that. One thing that we do to end every single one of our calls is we will kind of recap, hey, this is what brought you here. This is what we recommend or what we're doing as our next steps. And everyone on my team asks, are you confident understanding the way forward? The serotonin releases that you can give somebody along the way are going to dictate the experience that they walk away with. So if you can do things like using those power words, I respect you. You deserve respect. You deserve honesty. Do you believe you deserve honesty? The more times that they say yes, every time they do, there's a little bit of a serotonin, a little dopamine release. And the more that you can build your conversation with those tiny little releases along the way, the better the experience is at the end. But we always ask, are you confident understanding what the next steps need to be so that you get the adequate representation that you deserve for this case?
And that's why I brought you onto the podcast because I'm like, man, Christine has great intake advice. And like, that's not, I mean, I do the marketing part, I'm about generating the lead, getting somebody to call the firm. And then like, but I do try to help like with the intake teams. And I love good, like, as me as CMO, fractional CMO, whatever, like my deepest relationships with these firms is almost always with the intake team because like I need to know from the intake team like what type of calls are you getting? Because like sometimes the intake team will be like, yeah, we're getting a lot of these weird like CPAP product liability calls, and it's like, "Oh, really?" And then we find a page on the website that's suddenly gotten more traffic about CPAP machines. Like, "Oh, we're getting calls because of that." Or like, "Oh, we're getting a lot of wrong number calls," and then it turns out to be like a Google Ads thing. And then like, trying to stay on theme here because like you've given like great like wholesale like intake customer service advice, but like bringing it back a little bit to reviews, like I'm working with the intake teams on like trying to get reviews, trying to ask for reviews, and getting to that moment where we can. Um, Before we started, I was talking about one like thing that the firms did called March Madness, where generally like what we would do is we would we would tell the teams at the firm, like, "Hey, like every review that we get on Google for the month of March that mentions your name, you get like X number of dollars." And this is an idea that I borrowed from a marketing director like way back when. And then people like it became my idea and then it became somebody else's idea. So this isn't like unique or novel to Tiffany Swedensky or whatever, but it's something that we used to do and don't do anymore because Google kind of caught on. And all of a sudden, like when we would get like influxes of reviews during a certain like period, we'd see like Google automatically take those reviews down. So you either have to have a system for combating like the removal of legitimate customer reviews, or you have to ask like reviews year round. And I mean, a lot of law firms, frankly, are focused on getting more reviews. Their Google business listing has more reviews than their top competitor. It's all about marketing, but it's also like important part of like customer service experience at the firm and something that I'm doing with one of my clients. Like they never want to ask for a review before getting a net promoter score survey back from whoever we talk to, which sometimes it could be a roadblock. Sometimes it's just easier to ask for the review. Like that's the big secret to getting reviews is asking for reviews. You're not going to get one if you don't ask. And text and emails are all like kind of weak. I don't know if you know this. Can you talk a little bit about like do you know like response rates to like the text and emails that you send out? Like do you have any how many of those get open? Like
Yes, we do. That is something we use through Medallia. I know that Medallia is a popular survey provider. They're kind of like that third party vendor that will compile the survey and that'll automatically send it out, generate it. But yeah, we get, oh my gosh, like a fraction of the amount and the volume that we send out. And we also kind of stagger it throughout the month because you don't just like with the Google reviews, if you suddenly have a whole bunch of surveys being taken, it's kind of like a little sus. It's like, oh, was this a bad day? Maybe there was an outage somewhere. Maybe there was something that happened that clearly did not give people the best experience with the product. And then suddenly for the entire month, 20% of all of your surveys for the month came from that one bad day. Like that's not a true reflection. That's like an outlier. So there is some of the like culling, if you will, of like, we're gonna put this into an outlier category. But for the most part, they send out hundreds. It's every single day. I mean, thousands if you think about it company wide. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if 10,000 surveys went out every single day. But we really would only get back like, oh gosh. I'm trying to think just for my one little team of 10 back like maybe a couple of years ago what that would look like. Cause now I've got like a bigger community. I've got like 50 people. It would probably be, like 20 surveys back a day is a pretty large volume day.
so yeah, that tracks. I mean, just in general, like I don't see like people responding to surveys very often or in high volumes. Like in my professional experience as a marketer, like I've seen like huge volumes of survey responses immediately after an event. Like if we're doing like event surveys. But that's like outside of law firms. Like within law firms, like the amount of like net promoter score surveys we get back, even when we're sending them out via text or email, like is like 10% might even be generous. Like we might get back like one a week, if we're promoting it really hard. Which, my issue with that, like for a law firm, is like it's not statistically significant. If we get back just one survey and like it's all tens, like or we get one survey back one week and it's all ones. People leave reviews when they're very emotional or they're very happy or very sad. And they leave feedback when they're very happy or very sad. That's the only two times like I never like filled out a net promoter score and been like threes because I was very mid about all of it. I've never done that. Like it's either because
Right?
I'm
Right.
super pissed or I loved it.
We would always, because another thing too that we would always kind of base our actual score on, we noticed that there were 3 categories of people. There's people that would either, and it's on a scale of 1 to 10. So the people that would either leave a 9 or a 10, that's a promoter. That's good. Anyone who leaves a 5 or below, that's a detractor. Anyone who leaves between 6 to 8, so 6, 7, 8, those are the ones that are just kind of like in the middle ground. So we split it up in that we deviated the scores kind of like so that we could get an accurate representation. So that
Yes.
way if anybody's leaving like 9s, it didn't mean that you did bad. Maybe this is maybe it's a teacher that never gave anybody an A, you know? This for their own reasons. So we kind of like, moved the margin a little bit, but then anything below a 5, we were like, okay, what are we willing to accept as a neutral experience? And anything below a 5, we're like, no, we're better. We're better than 50%. We're better than the middle. We got to be better than the middle. So anything 5 or below is considered a detractor, and we would actually like follow up with those people and, hey, how can we make the experience better? The kind of thing. But one thing that we would do to try and target those people in the middle and get them like, because the ones that are in the middle, they can be swayed. If you leave a 6, 7, or an 8, we can get you to a 9 or a 10. I believe we can.
And you're also touching on a strategy that we use on social media to get more engagement. Because on social media, like the way people leave comments, they'll leave comments if they love it. They'll leave comments if they want to hate, but people really love to leave comments if they want to correct you. Like I noticed that a lot in like Instagram Reels, TikTok videos. If you see somebody doing something wrong, like you'll open the comments and it's just a flood of people like eager to give advice and like let's just assume like everyone's like fundamentally good at heart. It's probably just a bunch of people like wanting to feel like they're helping out and like maybe even like wanting to impress somebody. And so like that's actually kind of something you're tapping into there is like you're getting people to like try to impress you. They'll put in that little extra effort because they want like Christine who they were talking to, but I know they're not talking to you these days. They're talking to somebody on your team. They want to talk to like somebody on the team and impress them and just give them and it's more of that again reciprocal kind of human interaction stuff. Um and it's just kind of interesting because people like emotion plays a huge part in it, like how they react on social media, how they engage with content, if they want to leave reviews, if they loved you, hated you, if they'll recommend you later. I mean, it's a big part of it. When you're looking at like a business product, whatever, and like in Google, like a business can actually respond to reviews. So like if you can imagine last time like you checked out a restaurant or something and you were looking at reviews, do you ever look at the owner responses? Like, is that like something you look at?
Oh my gosh, I was not expecting this, but I'm so glad you mentioned this. There is a perfect example here recently, and it blew up on the Springfield Facebook page. So there's this guy who I don't I think he still has some restaurants. His business name was Missouri Mike, and he
Huh?
had like a barbecue restaurant. And he branched out to a second location and then a sandwich shop. And he was uh, very involved with his comment. And then people would leave, like one person would be like 2 stars, the meat was overcooked or the meat was a little dry. And he got defensive. He'd be like, well, you just don't know what, blah, blah, blah. No meat. But it ended up like there was one comment or one thread or something that somebody, and they just went back and forth. And this business owner lost all credibility. And I mean, it's just a restaurant, and it looked pretty good. And he had like a good menu and he had great employees. And, like my boyfriend and I, we would go to the second location kind of like on a biweekly basis. And we just love the staff so much. And the food was pretty decent too. But after that happened, it almost was like cancel culture took over because then a bunch of people that were kind of mid, they would have probably left like a 6 to 8 survey score for this guy. They went immediately into a detractor zone and they just like, nope, we're not doing business with him. And he had to shut his locations down.
Oh my God. It's terrible.
But yeah, it's funny though because there's also Ask Reddit has like they'll read some of the threads, and I love putting up Ask Reddit on YouTube and just put it in the background. It'll read all the interactions. But I think one of the Ask Reddits that we listened to recently was, what's a time where you got into an online social media fight? Like what did how did it transpire? How did it turn out? And it made me think of this guy, and I was like, this guy just completely just destroyed his business like that. And I don't think he meant to. And I think he was just being very defensive and passionate about what he believed in, but it completely overshadowed what this other person believed in. And whenever you have something like that going on, the masses are going to rally to the underdog. Like here's this guy that's sitting up on his high horse. He's got businesses. Clearly he has more money than this customer does. He's
He
better off
wasn't
than this
saying
little
stuff
guy.
like that in the comments, was he?
Oh, not in the comments, but whenever the people started to chime in to defend the customer, and they were just like, "Sorry, Mike, you're awful. Like, how could you be saying this stuff?" And it was kind of like that assumed like you're in a better position than this person probably is. Like, what are you doing here? So they canceled him, and and it was so unfortunate because he had delicious food to help you. There's just this one person's interaction, but then there's also I'll turn to a better example. There are also business owners that will see comments like that, and they will leave their response up like, "Hey, that's not at all the kind of experience we want you to have. I'm now personally involved in this. Hey, I'm going to send you a message. Let's see how we can work this out." And then, a couple days later, the customer comes back and they post another respond, and they're like, "Hey, they did the right thing. I'm really happy. My initial experience wasn't so great, but this is what they did for me, and now I'm good." And the public sees that. The public follows the drama that's unfolding. And if it has a good end, if it has a happy end of the story, then everyone's going to feel good about it. But whenever somebody doesn't have such a happy end of the story, just like how people want to correct, they kind of jump in and they put their opinion. They're like, "You're wrong for treating this customer this way. You're wrong." And then they just assume, and then accusations start flying, and before you know it, it's just a whole mess. So the best thing to do, because people see it, people are going to see it. The best thing to do is respond. Take ownership. Take ownership for it. Hey, your opinion matters. I can't change the way you feel, but I certainly can change the way I respond to it. So let's make this right. Let's talk. What do we need to do to make this right?
Positioning is really important in these kind of things because, like, if you come out at the gate really defensive, and I've seen those responses in Google, where a lot of times that when somebody leaves a bad review for a law firm, it's because the law firm wouldn't take the case. Like, it wasn't the case that they wanted, or it was the details were bad. It wouldn't have been a good. The person didn't need an attorney. Like, that would have hurt them more than it would have helped them. But for some people who are looking for an attorney, that's the only thing about. They feel like they need somebody to be their advocate to defend their rights, even if it's just, their landlord was rude to them on the phone or something kind of trivial like that. Um, but a lot of times, like, these law firms, they're, people leaving bad reviews are the people who got rejected by the firm. And so, like, I've seen the law firms come into the comments and will get really defensive because the person leaving the review will say something like, "This firm didn't listen to me, nobody got back to me, nobody responded to me." And then the defensive review will be like, "Yes, we did," and blah blah blah, blah, and like really kind of coming off with that like defensive kind of attitude. But
The way
then
you
like
feel isn't valid. Ooh. Oh.
and I mean, and to be fair, sometimes they're a little crazy. Like, they're a little crazy, but they still deserve to be heard. I think we did mention this on the last podcast, but like, hysterical people act hysterically to good information, bad information, that kind of thing. Yeah. Um, and so you can do that, or you can do like, "Hey, I'm sorry you had a bad experience. Please call us at this, that, this, and that," and leaving like a detailed, honest response that comes from a place of, "We want to help you, but maybe we can't help you, but we'll do what we can to make you happy." Because like everyone is a potential referral source, everyone is a potential review. And so it's important to like treat everyone in that way and take everything seriously. And really like if your law firm, and maybe this is like a good topic for the next podcast, like just talking about like how much like um how many people do you need working the phones? How much time do they need on the phones to be able to do a successful intake? We can talk about that and mix in like a few marketing topics there, so we're not full on intakes the whole time. But I mean, intakes is so important because like all the marketing that you can do for a law firm doesn't exactly matter if you're not signing cases or your team's really bad on the phone. So this is a huge important part of it anyway.
First interaction, if you think about like a relationship, every like spouse, friend, client, these are all relationships. So if the first impression of that relationship is bad, you have to recover. And now you immediately have to put more work and it's harder. So
Yeah.
if you, and you know, you got to have the right uh, kind of the people in the seats that are willing to not take it personally.
Well, and also like not take it personally and then like take I don't want to say take their job seriously because I think by and large like they do take their job seriously, but like um I guess like connect with the caller and understand like everyone's the main character in their own story. You know, the caller is the main
Yes.
character in their own story. The person doing intakes, the main character in their story. You know, it's important to see it like that.
We
Um,
always say nobody's the bad guy in their own story.
no, nobody's the bad, except for maybe my mom.
She's like, "I'm the bad guy here."
I am the bad person. I did that for her because she's actually like creating a Spotify account so she can
Like a lovely person. I've met her. She's great. Yes.
not that low. She's a little mean, but all right. Tiffany, stop roasting your mom. Um, so we'll talk like one thing I'm kind of curious to pick your brain about though is like how many like because a lot of times these firms have like one person answering their phones, acting as receptionist, routing calls, and then also they have to be like the intake person to where they're handling customer service complaints and they're doing full intakes. And like personally, like I have a hard time convincing firms like, look, you need another full-time intake person to handle all these calls. Otherwise, if this one person's doing it, they're stretched so thin, like, it's such a, like, a bad experience, and it's hurting more than it's helping. So, like, a lot of firms, like, once they reach, like, a certain call volume, how do they expand on this intake team? So we'll wrap up. I'd really like to eventually one of these episodes pick your brain on how, like, how you get people to bring how you get intake teams to bring personality to the call a little bit. Um, talk about that kind of in tandem with some marketing topic. But like that's something that I know like me, like if I'm ever in the position of like, oh, I need to coach somebody who's answering phones, which is not my bread and butter. That's not what I do. Like how do I help them like be comfortable and like be themselves? Cause like you can tell somebody to be themselves and they're you tell me to be myself and immediately I'm 10 times more awkward, which is either myself or just what happens when you ask me to be myself. Um,
People tell me be myself, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if you're ready for that. Quite, you know. Yeah.
You don't know me very well, sir. Uh, well, anyway. So, thanks everyone for joining in. We'll be back next week with podcast number 3. Thanks for listening.